to join us.
Oh, Brady, I love your t-shirt.
Thank you.
Oh, I should have my Be a Hero shirt on.
I love you, Congresswoman.
Liz is on vacation, so I won't tell her that wear the branding, Bradley.
Yeah, I'm sure she'd have nothing to say.
All right, let's get started. Folks are joining. We've got a great group this evening. My name is Julia Barnes. I'm with Team Be Hero, and I'm so grateful that you all have taken the time to join us this evening. Just a quick breakdown of what we're going to talk about tonight. I am going to kick it over to our illustrious host, who will introduce our special guests, and we'll watch some clips of a very fascinating and awesome interview that Adi was able to do a couple weeks ago with Congresswoman Pressley. And at the end, we're going to have time for some Q&A about particularly the things that Adi and Congresswoman Pressley were able to discuss, questions about how we're approaching disability rights, questions about Bradley Whitford's acting choices, things you're gonna have an opportunity to have that time. So with that being said, I'm so happy to introduce a great supporter of Be Heroes and a good friend of ours here, a noted actor and wonderful progressive activist, Bradley Whitford. Bradley, kicking to you.
Thank you, Julia. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Adi Barkan is a dear, dear, dear friend of mine. He actually performed my marriage, and as many of you know, due to the progression of his ALS, Adi now relies on around-the-clock home care to survive. He successfully forced his health insurance company to pay for most of that care, and is extraordinarily lucky to have some friends with money who allow him to pay for the rest. Otherwise, he would need to be in a nursing home to stay alive. And he's very clear that his quality of life in an institution away from his incredible wife and gorgeous children would be intolerable. Home care is literally keeping Adi alive, and he's, again, very lucky to be able to receive this type of care. There are 131,000 Americans died in nursing homes and long-term facilities during the COVID crisis, and that's exposed just how critical it is for people with disabilities and aging folks to live at home. I can tell you, in my experience, my mother lived a very long and wonderful life. She had a stroke, and I have 5 siblings who work and have jobs. But if I wasn't as obnoxiously lucky to have had some luck in show business, my mom would have died 3 years before. She needed around-the-clock care, and that was basically $100,000. If somebody has a stroke, they need often around-the-clock care, and I don't think people are anticipating the scope of that burden at the most vulnerable time a family can feel. Now, Joe Biden promised Adi to, as he said, fight for the care and well-being of everyone as if it were his son, his daughter, or his wife. As president, he's delivered, and with the American Jobs Plan, President Biden has committed to $400 billion to support people with disabilities and seniors who rely on home care, as well as the care workers they employ. It will make sure that people like Adi get good care and can, continue living full and independent lives. Adi and one of our wonderful guest tonight, who I'm thrilled to share a screen with. Representative Ayanna Pressley from Massachusetts had the chance to discuss the importance of this commitment, as well as other issues of health and disability justice. We are going to roll some clips, then we'll get to hear from Representative Pressley, as well as the Director of Communications and Outreach at Disability Rights Pennsylvania, and someone who wants to be a background artist on the West Wing, Imani Barbarin. About why this conversation is so important. And after that, you guys will have an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists. And so with that, I will toss it back.
Thank you so much, Bradley. I apologize. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead, Imani. Forgive me.
Apologies for cutting you off. Thank you so much, Bradley, for the introductions. I really appreciate it. Home community-based services is incredibly important, and it is something that I am personally vested in. I have cerebral palsy, and about 3 years ago, I was in a nursing home because I had broken my ankle and my home wasn't accessible when I was injured with a disability. And so this is near and dear to my heart, and knowing what it's like to live in a nursing home, it could be very devastating psychologically. And so that experience in part helped me get more into disability and politics. So can we roll the first clip? Because I think that that's an important stepping stone to this conversation.
Absolutely.
Austin, I think we're having a sound issue.
Yeah, we're having a sound issue.
One moment.
Just a note, if you're on your AirPods or headphones, that may be the problem, since you're sharing screen.
Just to know, please don't make any memes of this screenshot. Thank you.
I mean, after a year of this, you think we would be
Please
through the tech difficulties.
You are the first Black woman ever elected to represent Massachusetts in Congress. You also identify as a member of the disability community. When did you first start identifying as disabled, and can you talk about how those intersecting identities have informed your work?
My identification with the disability community, where I sort of publicly asserted it as a part of who I am, is when I revealed that I was living with the autoimmune disease alopecia totalis, which resulted in my baldness. And the community embraced me vigorously. You know, I'm still humbled by it. I'm still grateful for it every day, because it gave me community acceptance. And how has it shaped and informed how I move now? It's really just confirmed for me, as someone who's always sought to legislate with an intersectional lens, how intersectional, systemic, and legislated the oppression has been for those who are minoritized or marginalized, simply for how they show up in the world. And so it is my honor, and I think my responsibility, to bring that lens to all lawmaking, to every policy and decision-making table, And I felt that way before I identified and was so warmly embraced by the disability community. You know, as I said in my reveal that day, I don't believe that I'm here simply to take up space, to occupy space. I think I'm here to create it. And I have been overwhelmed by the power of what that representation has meant to so many people. And in fact, recently I was saying to a number of disability advocates, those doing the work of DJ every day, that I learned how to take up space and to create it simultaneously from the disability community.
Thanks, Austin. Congresswoman, thank you for being here. I so appreciate the opportunity to be in conversation with you. As a fellow Black woman, I was so floored by your announcement that you're part of the disability community, because I know the emotional labor that it takes to identify as disabled while also Black. Can you talk a little bit about that decision in identifying as disabled?
Sure. Well, first, I just want to say thank you to Be a Hero. Thank you to the whole team. Thank you to Bradley. Thank you to you, Imani. Thank you for bringing us all together tonight to have this important conversation. It always feels good to be in community with you, even when we have to do it virtually. And Bradley, I do want to thank you for very effectively sort of setting the framework for this conversation. And Imani, I'm so grateful to be here with you always. Thank you for what you do each and every day in the fight for DJ. And, you know, that leads me to a segue about why I made the decision to come forward and to have this reveal. I think, Imani, you have really asserted the fact that we cannot have a discourse or do the work of legislating to codify civil rights or racial justice without centering disability justice. You know, that the movement is intersectional. We don't always do a great job. You know, white supremacy is dominant, ableism is dominant, the patriarchy is dominant. So we have to be very intentional in the intersectionality of these movements, and again, in how we legislate. And so for me, I just decided that, you know, I had worn a wig very briefly, and I should say that I went completely bald within a 5-week period. So what was initially alopecia, what we thought errata, because there are several types, turned into alopecia totalis within a matter of weeks. And so I lost all the hair on my head, my face, and my body within a 5-week period. And the day that I went completely bald was on the eve of the impeachment, the first impeachment vote. And so a dear friend connected me with a stylist. They custom fit me with a wig so that I could go to the floor that day and deliver my statement about why I was voting in the affirmative on articles of impeachment. And, you know, the thing is, to be Black in America, to be a Black woman, to be a Black Congresswoman, everything I do is political, right? And so, including our hair, you know, and that's a conversation for another day. But we didn't think I could enter the House floor with my head without a wig, because people would have thought I was making a statement. And in fact, many people still think that. So this was a transformation not of my choosing. And so for that reason, I knew that I was not going to wear a wig very long in order for me to sort of show up authentically and fully. That wasn't where I was in my journey. Never say never. There's some great wigs out there, you know. But you know, again, the community has embraced me so vigorously, and I'm grateful for that. And thank you for being my teacher. Thank you for being my sibling in the movement. But again, ultimately, I came forward because there's 7 million people living with the autoimmune disease alopecia in this country. And again, I want to create space for them, and representation does matter. But the point of representation is for how it shows up in our lawmaking. And so that really is ultimately why I came forward. It was about self-agency, it was about authenticity, and it was about creating space.
Yeah, and you mentioned about creating space and intersectionality. And for me, I understand ableism, I understand racism is inherently disabling. You know, systemic racism, environmental, interpersonal, it is inherently disabling. And so the people who are most marginalized do not always have access to building and codifying laws as many others do. How do you build space in your practice, in the work that you do, for people to advance in their careers so that they can make a meaningful change in political office?
You know, I think the way that I seek to do that is, you know, I say every day that the people closest to the pain should be the closest to the power, driving and informing the policy making, right? So you can't be a government for and by the people if policy and decision-making tables, if the corridors of power do not reflect the citizenry with which they serve. And so again, the true power of that representation is not so that we can say, look how progressive we are, look how diverse we are. It's about the power of those lived experiences showing up in our lawmaking. And so it does mean to be intentional. So that means maybe 100 more phone calls, 50 more emails in order to build a team that will be reflective and representative in that way. Both on the legislative side and that sort of thing, but it just requires intentionality and then, you know, will and courage. And again, the acknowledgement that the ultimate gain is for everyone, because it means that we are centering the lived experience, the humanity and the dignity of all, because we have that representation around the table. If you're developing policies through a completely monolithic and homogenized viewpoint, you're missing a lot. And so that's why that perspective, that diversity of perspective, opinion, and thought is so critical. And especially when it comes to lawmaking, because the other thing I say, and my brother's rocking my t-shirt, is that policy is my love language. And the reason why I say policy is my love language is because we have seen discrimination, we have seen hurt and harm codified in lawmaking. Injustices and inequities in terms of access to healthcare, to transit, to housing, to employment, these things have not been naturally occurring, Imani. You know, they have been precisely legislated. And so if we truly want to build a more equitable and just world, then we have to be just as intentional and just as precise in how we legislate equity, how we legislate justice, and how we legislate healing.
Exactly. And I think that the COVID-19 pandemic is so emblematic of the need for people with disabilities to be in public office and in policy making. Because one of the greatest hurts of the disability community is that when all of these changes had been made, we weren't really involved in a lot of them. You know, we had the blueprint. I always say disabled people are the blueprint for innovation. And yet we were sidelined in the response and how we take care of one another as a society. And so with that, I kind of want to segue off to our second video, if Austin can play it for us.
Absolutely.
When you came to Congress, you brought with you a career of wisdom from being a political operative, an elected official, and a Black woman in America. But I am sure that there was still a steep learning curve. What have you learned, and what can you teach us activists on the outside about how Congress works, so that we can build more powerful movements and more effective collaborations with members of Congress?
Yeah, that's a great question, Adi. I think I've learned that there is a lot about this institution that's designed to feel exclusive and out of reach. But the honest truth, giving credit again to the organizing household I grew up in, is that I still believe that the power of the people is greater than the people in power. And that might seem like a contradiction since I'm technically in one of those seats of power. But It's just what I believe and what I know to be true. You know, every time we have seen legislative change, social change, although the elected officials get the credit for it, the truth of the matter is that it has everything to do with the sustained movement, the convictions, and the courage, really, of everyday people. There are good faith partners in government that are committed to doing the work. I hope the movement leaders that we work with daily, including you, see me and my team that way. But again, Congress doesn't lead, it responds. And so daily it falls to the people to apply the political pressure so that Congress shows political courage. And daily, I do feel like we are winning the battles that we need to create a more just and equitable world. It is hard to have faith in systems that are woefully broken, but my faith in our movement has never waned. And I believe in the power of us to build that more just and equitable world. So I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic. And honestly, you know, Adi, given the inequities and disparities and racial injustices that have persisted for so long, that have been legislated, I don't even have the luxury of growing apathetic or cynical because people are depending on me.
I have to say, it feels a bit, narcissistic to be nodding my head at myself. I'm like, my own amen corner. I'm like, yeah, I agree. I co-sign. Yeah, what she said. Yeah, it's very weird. But anyway.
No problem. I agree with myself a lot, so I understand.
Yeah.
So one of the things that you said in that video, not necessarily that you frustrated me, but the phrase that the Congress responds. And I feel like a lot of constituents feel like we're constantly having to push the needle in the midst of experiencing trauma ourselves because of the decisions made from people in power. And so it can be kind of exhausting, at least from an activist perspective, to constantly be asked, like, tell me why this is important. But it is so important that we become involved. So what are the political realities for people with disabilities who are trying to get into activism, who are trying to push the needle to get people in Congress to pay attention to our issues?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that we need to be aware of?
I mean, this seems like a crazy question coming, or this seems like an unreasonable question coming from you, Imani, because I mean, you do this every day, right? But what I would say is something that's always really irked me as a voter is that elected officials will single issue constituencies. And so, they'll come to the Latinx community and they'll tell you their policy on immigration reform and think they're all set. They'll come to, women and they'll talk about reproductive choice. Perhaps they come to the disability community if they come, and maybe they talk about, I don't know, what do they talk about? The ADA or that, or the IDEA maybe. They come to Black folks and they'll just talk about mass incarceration, and, for a while there to the LGBTQIA community and would just speak about marriage equality, right? And the thing is that no community deserves to be single issue. We're really letting elected officials off the hook when we do that, and they do a disservice to us because we don't live in big checked boxes. We live in intersectionality, we live in nuance, we live in complexity. So I mean, shame on us if you don't get that voting rights is a DJ issue. Shame on us if you don't get that housing justice is a DJ issue. Shame on us if you don't get that educational equity and healthcare justice are DJ issues. And so I'll never forget, because I've always been an ally of the DJ community, but I would say now I'm an accomplice. I'm a co-conspirator, okay? But I've always been an ally, but now I'm an accomplice. And I remember when I was on the Boston City Council, I traveled, I'm very passionate about public transit as a public good. and do believe that it should be free. And I asked a DJ activist from an independent living advocacy organization, Diana, to ride the T with me so that I could see her experience, okay? And I think about it now and I get choked up. I cried openly and I said, this violation of your civil rights is happening every day in plain view. And I have never seen it. I mean, every elevator was broken.
Yep.
It took us about 2.5, 3 hours to travel by public transit, what should have taken 30 minutes. And I asked her, to your question, Imani, about, fighting and that kind of thing. I said, how long have you been an advocate in doing this? And she said, well, I'm 25. And I repeated the question and she repeated the answer. I'm 25. And that is the point, right? And then I got it, because my mother told me, may she rest in peace and power, look, to be Black is a beautiful thing and something to be proud of, but you're being born into a struggle. And I have an expectation that you will do your part in that struggle. I don't think that I had the awareness to get that meant that I would have to, that the world would see the ceiling as my very survival, instead of my most basic needs being the floor. You know what I'm saying? And not the ceiling. And so when I said that to her and she said, well, I'm 25, that's right, she's been fighting since she emerged into the world.
Yes, yes.
For equality, for the most basic of needs, right? And so the lesson is we just have to keep it up. Because when I think about the fact that the ACA was preserved and even still exists, that is, and of course we need to go farther. We need Medicare for all, but the fact that the ACA even still exists, the fact that in my Commonwealth of Massachusetts, we were able to change the crisis care standards during this pandemic, right? The fact that we have these home community-based services, this is about what the community has done. This is about the urgency and the demands with which you have asserted. No, I will lay my body on the ground if I have to. So elected officials get the credit, but really what happens in Congress is reflective and responsive to the needs to the demands of the movement. So we just can't let up.
Yes, and I relate so hard to what you said about, your mother telling you that you're going to be born into a struggle. My aunt is actually on this call. She knows my mom. So it's always been one of those things where my mom always told me, you're going to have to advocate for yourself. People would talk to my mom about me in order for her to advocate for me. And she would sit there looking at them like, it's right there. Like, she would not talk to them unless I talked first. And so I relate to that so hard. And I think that one of the things that's hard is that it prematurely ages you. It makes it harder for life to go by when you're constantly struggling and then advocating because you're struggling and then talking about your struggle in order for people to understand your struggle so that they move the needle forward. But I really do appreciate your answer. I think we should go to our last clip of the night, okay. I believe. Let's roll that one.
Sharing now.
I also have become disabled as an adult, and I am trying to find my place in the community and in the work. With gratitude and open ears, but also a willingness to keep speaking loudly. On the topic of disability rights, I rely on 24-hour home care, and having caregivers makes it possible for me to be here today to have this conversation with you. Most people living with ALS do not have access to the care I have. President Biden just proposed a big investment in home and community-based care, which would be a good step forward to getting everyone the care they need to lead independent lives. What do we need to do to get this bill enacted into law? And then how do we build on it to achieve healthcare justice in America?
Yeah, well, first I just want to acknowledge that those strides, those investments, that progress was only made possible because, again, of the strength and the vigilance of this movement and leaders like yourself. And it's been my honor really to be fighting alongside you for home and community-based services. We know the need has always outpaced the funding here. We know that the care is essential, and yet the federal government has failed in the past to meet the scale. And unfortunately, like many other injustices, the COVID crisis has really laid bare these deep inequities and these disparities in care. And HCBS was a lifeline for so many, but the infrastructure needs resources. And so that's what we've been fighting for. And the Biden proposal comes pretty close to the dollar amount that would make this a reality. We just have to keep pushing. We have to keep pushing my colleagues for the most robust funding possible. The good news is, again, thanks to the ongoing work of advocates, their indefatigable efforts, and there are a lot of champions in Congress on this issue. This is just one piece of how we move in the direction of healthcare justice. We have to make these services readily available. We have to compensate our home care workers, but most of whom are women of color, by the way, with a living wage. But I'm working towards a vision, Adi, where that high quality care would be delivered to everyone who needs it. And they've never seen a bill. And that's the vision of Medicare for All. That's what it would be like to live in America with healthcare equity and healthcare justice. Another world is possible. We are making strides to getting there, and we just have to, keep the pressure up. I always love to reference, President Johnson at the height of the civil rights movement, when being pushed to advance voting rights and civil rights legislation, saying, "Make me do it." We will.
Cool. So here are the numbers, right? There's about a quarter of all Americans have a disability. About 90% of adults want to age into their own homes. And about 1/3 of all COVID deaths happen in congregate care settings. This is a life or death policy idea. We do not have any more time to waver on this. What are the things that we need to do to push this forward so that it gets done? This has been a decades-long project. I want it done. When are we going to get it done, and how can we help get it there?
Yeah, I hate to be a broken record, but listen, our sibling in the movement, Latasha Brown, co-founder of Black Voters Matter, says that organized power is realized power. And we know that that's true. And so we just can't let up. The Biden administration has given us a great framework here. And now we have to, again, legislate in a way that makes these investments, that honors this as critical infrastructure. And we have to be bold to root out these systemic injustices and to be responsive to the movement that elected this administration. Because the most marginalized met the moment and made this victory possible. These were activists from the disability community, the LGBTQIA community, young people, Black folks, Indigenous, AAPI, Latinx, the most marginalized, mobilized, made it possible for democracy to breathe another day. And so now it's incumbent upon this administration to meet the moment and to meet the needs of those in that movement who delivered this victory. And so, again, the fact that HCBS has been, included in this framework, again, has everything to do with the efforts of the movement. And we know this care is essential. And, the federal government has really failed in the past. They haven't kept pace. They have failed in the past to meet the scale. COVID, again, has laid bare all those inequities. And HBCS, this is a lifeline. This is infrastructure, but it needs resourcing. So again, organized power is realized power, and we just have to continue. We have the framework, and we have to legislate and invest accordingly. And so we just have to keep the pressure up. This is, half of the victory is that it is included, and it exists at all because of the efforts of this movement.
Yeah, and one of the remarks that you made in that video reminds you of this picture from the start of the pandemic that haunts me. And I can't remember what article it was associated with, but it was basically there was disabled people who were outside on a balcony at the start of the pandemic, and every single care worker that was around them was a woman of color. And that stuck in my mind, because I knew that if the women of color who were caring for the disabled people in that photo were not getting the healthcare that they need, then the people who were being served in that photo could possibly contract COVID and be harmed.
That's right.
So I feel like a lot, like you said before, intersectionality is so important, because we can't just fund HCPS without funding the healthcare and the employment and funding the home community-based service workers, many of whom do so unpaid, or do so for a very low rate. Can we talk a little bit about how we're going to empower and fund and pay equitably the people who are the service workers in home and community-based services?
Yeah, it's just time. You so eloquently just laid that all out. And I think because of your own lived experience, you could center them, whereas, oftentimes this is a workforce that is treated as if it is invisible. And, I just think people keep throwing around this word that we're in a reckoning. And maybe that's just, for a lot of people, that's poetry. But I grew up in the church, and a reckoning is something epic, of huge proportion, So if we are truly in the midst of a reckoning on racial injustice, then we have to see, this workforce, which is overwhelmingly women of color and getting paid low wages. We have to see that investment as how we respond to this reckoning. This is a healthcare justice issue. It is a racial justice issue. And it's a gender justice issue, since these are, again, overwhelmingly women. So, but I very much appreciate your highlighting that intersectionality and how that was really illustrated in that photo. Because again, many people, you get it, right? But it's a lifeline, quite literally. Yeah. But many people do see this workforce as invisible and expendable. So
yes, very much so. I feel like when we talk about raising the wage, we have to also talk about these workers as well, and making sure that they have the tools to survive. Where our healthcare is intricately linked to one another, and this pandemic has shown that. And I wanted to ask you about what people with disabilities need to do in order to run for office, to be political operators, to get into seats of power. Because one of the things that you talked about, in, I believe it was your first video, was that it kind of feels very mythical. Like you can't really make sense of what it means to run for Congress or to understand it once you're there. It's a very steep learning curve. And for a lot of disabled people, that's a red flag, because it means that access has to be built in at every step of the way. What steps are being made to make sure that disabled people can run for office, can be included in these boardrooms, have a seat at the table? What are those steps that are being taken to do that?
Being fully transparent, Imani, I don't think very many. And where we do see organizations who are committed to advancing leadership parity and having representation of every walk of life in the corridors of power and around policy and decision-making tables, I think there are organizations like Emerge who have had, very specific targeted, trainings. But, I think disability, activists and the opportunity for them to run for office or to be actively recruited and encouraged to run, we've not done a good job of that. So again, there are pockets of targeted efforts. But I also think, people will tend to pigeonhole, even those that are raising, their hand in that instance and say that they want to run, so there's a lot of unlearning that has to be done because, ableism, like racism, like white supremacy, is systemic, it's structural. And so even when we think in these organizing spaces, in these spaces where we seek to organize electorally, that we are evolved, usually there is still very much a blind spot when it comes to ableism and the active recruitment of disability activists and candidates. So we need to do more, we need to do better, and y'all need to continue to call us out. So, I love it when you or Rebecca Copley, folks will be online and they'll see a posting about something and they'll say, hey, this isn't good enough. It doesn't go far enough, so
Thank you.
I feel badly just saying expend more labor because, folks are tired, we've already expended so much for the, just to affirm our most basic humanity. But, Coretta Scott King said that, freedom is earned every generation. So, I wish it was something that we earned and you just sort of had in perpetuity. But, we seek to do the work of collective liberation of the minoritized and marginalized. And unfortunately, we don't get no vacation days. So it just,
I feel like K through 12. I feel like K through 12 was a lie because we had 3 months in the summer, but apparently I'm supposed to work through that as an adult.
I don't know, Imani. I don't think that's what the ancestors meant. We're not supposed to labor every second. I'm trying to tap out. I'm hoping that Bradley is going to get me a role in the next Black Panther or something that he can make a phone call. And, that would be a welcome reprieve.
Make sure they have ramps, Bradley, because I'm coming too. But yeah, I want to see disabled people everywhere. I want to see disabled people in office, on TV, everywhere. I want to see wheelchairs in space. So I want to make sure that disabled people have the ability to chase those dreams and to be change makers. And I want to thank you so much for your time. I think we're going to wrap up now for Q&A with the audience. I see all of your lovely faces, by the way. I've been seeing what you've been able to do. I see you when you text too, so it's like middle school.
One more thing I want to say is that we need more, and everyone's journey is different. But Katie Porter identifies as a member of the disability community. We need more people who have disabilities that are not visible to also affirm that they are members of the community, because there's representation that's out there that people don't even know.
Exactly.
So that will let you know that it's possible. In order to be it, you have to see it. So we just need more folks to feel liberated, to claim that as a part of their identity and to make that known.
Exactly. And I really do appreciate you being visible with your disability and making sure that you say, I am at the forefront of this. I'm going to make sure that it is built into every piece of legislation that I do. So I really do appreciate that. Yeah, thank you so much. I was so nervous for this. I was so excited. I called my mom 3 times. I don't know if she's on this call, but I know that some family members are. But
Mama, you did an excellent job with this one. Mama, auntie, the whole village. You did an excellent job. So it was my honor, and I'll sit at this table with you anytime.
Thank you,
Imani. Great job.
Thank you. Julia, I think that's you.
Yeah, appreciate it. Bradley, do you have any, you want to kick us off? For
Q&A?
I just want
to echo, except for you, Congresswoman Pressley, in my experience, it's true. Politicians are weather vanes, and we need to change the weather. And over the course of my life, I've seen that we don't get a democracy. We got to make it. every damn day. Where we are is the result of specific choices that leave a lot of people out of the spectacular aspiration of this country. And one politician won't fix it. One election won't fix it. If the past few years have taught us anything, it's that racism, fascism, structural injustice, otherizing is always in the next room doing push-ups. And we have to expect it and fight it. And I just want to hear from both of you. I always want people to leave with sort of practical next steps about what they can do in their own lives to support the work you're doing. Is it haranguing our representatives? Is it remaining connected with the disability rights organizations? Be a hero. What's the practical thing that people can do tomorrow?
Well, for me, at least as a disability activist, I would always ask people to stand firm in your identity and tell your story. It is so important. One of the first things as a communicator, as a communications professional, that people always ask for is your story. How do these policies affect your day-to-day? And making sure you're able to communicate that with people or have somebody help you communicate it with other people, because that's one of the most important things, because a lot of times, a lot of legislation is written without our stories involved and without our voices included. And so that's one way to do it. Another way to do that is to making sure that you know your rights, know what is entitled to you, know who you need to contact when things go awry. Because once you build relationships with your legislators, you could hold them to task as well. And I hope that that's helpful tips for you going forward.
Yeah, I'll co-sign all of that. Thank you for uplifting the importance of storytelling. You know, as the saying goes, in order to change policy, first you have to change hearts and minds. And it can be exhausting. I resent sometimes that we have to weaponize our trauma in order to feel seen, in order to be heard, in order for there to be responsive legislation. But history has shown us that it has always been what has moved the dial. So that storytelling is so important, and you can do that on your platforms. You can do that through your elected official. I love when people, just the other day, we were taking to task pharma for the exorbitant cost of prescription drugs. And I put out a tweet wanting to hear from the DJ community, and then Coakley signal boosted. And, you know, all of those lived experiences, those stories that came back were very helpful to me in holding pharma accountable and giving them, you know, real life examples, because without that, people will be very disconnected. They'll see these issues very abstractly, and you want it to feel personal. You know, so that is so important. And then I would just say, although people do have tried to marginalize bold progressive policies like Medicare for all, like my federal job guarantee, like a Green New Deal, like fare free transit, but these are popular policies. So, and they're popular because one, activists have been putting in the work. So now a number of these policies are a part of the daily, you know, lexicon in our movements. But also because the people know that we need bold, systemic, structural change. And you do that through lawmaking. So, you know, in terms of what's the practical, Bradley, again, this is tough because this is a group of very seasoned activists who lean on their electeds all the time. So I would just say, let's really focus on HCBS within this bill. Let's make sure that the bill is robust and that it's one big bill, so they can't sort of, you know, pick us off. And let's affirm that, you know, this infrastructure matters across the board. One of the things in my federal job guarantee is that it's about compensating people that are doing elder care and child care. That's infrastructure, right? So, you know, Imani, in the same way that you said, look, yes, we want, HCBS, this is a critical lifeline and infrastructure, but we want to take care of the workers too. Let's make sure that within the advancing of a jobs and infrastructure bill, that they can't pick off our groups. Let's, you know what I mean? So just continue to name that and to fight for that, but all the other things too, paid leave, you know, a care economy, you know, so just continue to be intersectional in your amplification, intentional in your organizing and your movement building. I don't know what other marching orders and call to action, because y'all do it all. I mean, that's like, you know, that's why I'm here. You already know. So
thank you, Congresswoman.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Imani. Okay, so we have a few more questions, some really good ones from the chat. One of them is from Mike, who asks, I care for my 95-year-old mother, and there isn't any way to have any free time to myself. I feel like at some point I need relief, just like childcare. What would that look like for a person like myself, a family caregiver? And is anything like that in this Biden funding bill?
Okay, give me a second on that one.
Sure.
Because I don't want to misrepresent, so I just want to make sure. I know that something like that would be taken care of in my federal job guarantee, but that's not on the floor for a vote. I mean, so we know care is the backbone of our nation's economy. We know it's high time that we finally act like it. We haven't made those critical investments to ensure that everyone at every stage of life has access to high quality care, the care that they need and they deserve, and that care workers are compensated for their essential work. Bradley shared the story of his mother. My mother transitioned at the age of 63 after a long battle with leukemia. I'm an only child and I was her caregiver. So I was very encouraged to see $400 billion, again, in these home and community-based services included in the president's proposal, and the ability to receive necessary care outside of a nursing home setting is really essential. So there are historic investments that are made in this. But on that specific point, I'm going to do some quick research, and we'll drop that answer in the chat.
Sure. We have some other really great questions too. One of them to share is, there's been a shift.
I'm sorry, Juliet. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure. Okay, so I did get an answer there. Okay, so so paid family leave is a short-term option. Okay.
Okay. Sorry, I'm sorry if I for the research on the fly, but you guys nailed it. So one of the questions is, there's been a shift. Historically, labor unions weren't enthusiastic about home care, but now, especially NDWA and SEIU have embraced deinstitutionalization, moving people who don't want to be into facilities like nursing homes back into their own homes. Can you talk a little bit about how important this has been for disabled people? Imani, if you want to lead us on this one, an answer to this one.
Yeah, so when SEIU wrote that letter in support of home and community-based services and shifting away from institutions, there were so many ripple effects. So many disabled people were like, holy crap, because the unions have been traditionally in favor of expanding institutions and keeping them open. And I think that it was really a touchstone moment for a lot of activists that really realized, it felt like, wow, we are actually making moves, you're actually making strides, and people are starting to see the value of us investing in home and community-based services. And so it means a lot to the community to have that support, because traditionally, it feels like we're always butting heads, but on this, I feel like we're changing the tide.
Awesome. All right, Bradley, we actually have a question for you.
Oh, no.
You're obviously very well known and influential on social media, and I appreciate you using your position to advocate for critical issues like Medicare for All. Besides using social media platforms and joining events, what do you think other celebrities should be doing to move conversations like these forward and take action?
I think it goes, stories are important. I always worry that, this is a horrible generalization, but I worry that progressives tend to think that culture is the way to achieve your moral vision, and culture absolutely is important, but I'm always torn because I know the power of storytelling, but I also know that will and grace won't do you any good if you have a pre-existing condition. We have to follow through that politics is actually where the rubber meets the road in terms of creating our moral vision. To support that, I think storytelling has blown open in a wonderful way. I still hear resistance. It's an unconscious version of the people who have been able to tell the stories for years, feeling like they're being replaced rather than understanding that storytelling is nourished by voices we haven't heard before and voices that we need to elevate. And it's very important to me to look for those stories. I don't know why we don't know about Pauli Murray. I don't know why that movie has not been made. I don't know why I wasn't taught about the woman who was sort of ground zero in terms of intersectional advocacy, in terms of women's rights. She's the one who inspired Ruth Bader Ginsburg on fighting for women's rights. She's the one who created the strategy to overturn separate but equal. She, in this day and age, she felt like she didn't conform in terms of gender. I just want to get those stories out there because they're so inspiring and they're so fresh. And that's what, I think that's part of what we can do, but understanding that we can't be satisfied. We have to follow through politically and change the direction through lawmaking, frankly.
If I may add to what Bradley just said, in terms of representation and storytelling, a study was conducted in 2019 of the top 100 films in the United States, and only 2.6% of those films had a disabled person with a speaking role. And right. I think 0 of them were Black disabled women. So when we talk about representation, I expect, Bradley, for you to have like an inclusion writer on all your projects that include disability.
I'll do that. Marlee Matlin is a dear friend of mine, and it's really interesting because she is often asked to. It's something an actor friend of mine named Rizwan Manji. I was talking about this with Wendell Pierce. I do not. I don't have to worry about representing as a white actor. I am, sort of normalized. And I know in the disability community, one thing Marlee really struggles with, and we're working on doing a movie together. She wants to do a movie where she's not simply defined by her disability. She wants to be a full human being where the point is not, she's often given these opportunities, to play the deaf person, not the full Marlee that deserves to be seen. But yes, I'll get going on the rider.
Imani, exceptional organizing prowess.
So much.
There, you saw the opportunity, you made the ask, and you're gonna make it happen. All right, I want to close this out with one last question, which I think is more sort of a good one to get a little bit of personal advice. So the question is from Corey, and she asks, recognizing how tiring it can be to fight for DJ within this past election, But now to also keep the pressure and hold those same representatives accountable, how do you find restoration and pursue self-care in order to keep up the fight? How do we take care of ourselves? Your advice on how we take care of ourselves during all this.
I get asked that question all the time and it terrifies me. I don't know if I know how to do it very well, but I really do like spending time with my family and goofing off. I feel like just being in community with others. And one of the hard parts about the pandemic has been like I can't be in their physical presence, which I miss, because there's something about that is just life-giving and life restoring. So wherever you can, and as long as it's safe and socially distanced, being in contact with the people in your life that support you and who want you to rest and who want the best things for you.
Yeah, I would co-sign that, and just I think as what I'm asking activists to do is in the same way that we hold space for our righteous rage and indignation at injustice, and we hold space for the radical, bold policies that we seek to advance, you have to also hold space unapologetically for your radical healing and joy. And the reason why I'm saying unapologetically is because for those of us who labor and do the work of movement building and justice seeking for all who are oppressed, minoritized, marginalized, we can feel guilty for taking respite or guilty for experiencing joy because we are so rooted in how wide and deep the suffering is. I feel I was given a lot of instruction in my life about the armor that I needed to put on to negotiate the world, to navigate hostile spaces, but there wasn't enough about joy. And I used to say that joy is a necessary act of resistance. And I stopped saying it because I don't want any of us to do the work of joy seeking and preservation in order to be in better utility. So like you deserve joy just because you deserve joy. It is not so that you can labor, more effectively. You deserve rest because you deserve rest, not so that you can be more indefatigable in your labor, So that's what I would ask everyone to do, is to just hold space for the righteous rage and indignation at injustice, continue to be radical and bold in advancing these policies, but hold comparable space unapologetically for your radical joy and healing.
I think those are incredibly generous and inspirational words to close our evening on. Thank you, Congresswoman. Thank you, Imani, and thank you, Bradley, for making time. And thank you, everybody who joined us. We are so grateful for you. Small dollar donors and supporters like you make evenings like this possible. This was our first in what is going to be a series of uncovered lives for Be a Hero. And we hope that you can join us in the future. If you haven't had a chance to support our work, and we are going to be diving in headfirst to a bunch of really awesome HCBS organizing over the next couple of months, please feel free to go to BeHeroFund.com/May20 and help support us. It's your small dollar donations, it's your support, it's your likes that keep us going, and we are so grateful for all of you. Thank you for joining us this evening. And have a great one.
Thank you, Bradley. Thank you,
thank you. Great to meet you.
Thank you, Adi. Thank you, Be a Hero.
Bye.